As a little boy, I thought my mom knew everything. I was sure she had eyes in the back of her head because she would always catch me whenever I was doing something wrong. She seemed to have answers for all my questions, and she knew what I felt, what I was afraid of. I remember some of the fights between my father and my mother. I also remember the tenderness they had together and how my father supported her in her illness. I now realize I knew very little about my mother. What I knew was from my projections as a 4 or 5-year-old 75 years ago. What would make her happy? What would make her sad? She was a very sensitive woman, but it never occurred to me to ask her what she was feeling and how she knew what I was feeling. I now suspect that there were two sources for that. One, she was a very sensitive person herself. But I realized there was another source of why she knew so much and could understand my feelings. She had experienced so much. She was orphaned at 9, shifted from one family home to another in my mother's hometown in Elsenfeld, Germany. At 16, she crossed the Atlantic alone to join her older sister here in New York, coming at the height of the Depression and marrying in the middle of that traumatic economic event. And then when World War II broke out, fearing for her relatives and being conflicted, and then hearing of her mother's death during this time when there was not much transatlantic flight and ships took weeks or so to cross the ocean, and she could not be with the rest of her family, her sisters and brothers who remained in Germany. I really only began to understand her as I grew up and experienced my own range of emotions. And then I began to realize she understood my feelings because she had had those feelings herself. She could sense in me her own version of the feelings that I was having. The times when I was afraid, the times when I was hurt, the times when I was picked on, or the times when I had a success. She had had those feelings. And so as I was thinking about the topic, experiencing Holy Week through the eyes of Mary, I thought again of how limited my knowledge of Mary is. And I tried to think back over what Mary had experienced. Because when we look at really what Mary experienced, she's experienced everything that you and I have experienced. And so I'm going to suggest that after we review what she went through, that you might pay particular attention to Mary's experiences and what she might have felt. And as I go through this, some of you may be inclined to close your eyes and just, enter into the scenes quickly. I won't take it for ill that you're going to sleep. But tradition has that Mary suffered 7 sorrows. Her flight to Egypt to escape the infanticide of a murderous ruler, Simeon's prophecy that her heart would be pierced, those panic days in Jerusalem when she thought she had lost Jesus in the crowd, walking with Jesus to Calvary, watching her son's execution, holding his body in her arms, placing him in a cold tomb. But there had been many other sorrows for Mary along the way, things that we don't think of. What was her feeling when her son left home to travel and teach? Or when he nearly killed himself fasting for 40 days in the wilderness? What were her feelings when whatever happened to Joseph, we don't know, whatever happened to her when Joseph was no longer on the scene? And what about the time when Jesus responded to the announcement of his mother's presence by saying to his brothers, to his disciples, who is my mother and my brothers? Whoever does the will of my God is brother and sister to me and mother. Sure, he was making a point. She must have known that. But still, it probably pierced her heart a bit. And as every mother knows, Mary experienced those daily sorrows, the first bruised knee, the unkind words, perhaps, of other children, the frightening illnesses that Jesus may have had, the surprised eyes of a little boy the first time he witnesses injustice, cruelty, or the suffering of another, the gifts she wished she could give him, the memories she wished she could preserve forever, the disappointments she wished with all her heart she could stop. And what about the events leading up to Holy Week? The supper in Simon's house in Bethany. Was she there? What feelings did she experience? What was her experience when Mary anointed the feet of Jesus? Or when Judas rebuked her for wasting the perfumed oil? And then Palm Sunday. Was she there? What was going on in her heart? She must have been aware of the conflict with the leaders. What kind of fear did she experience? And Monday, apparently, was the day that Jesus cleansed the temple. Was she there? Did she understand what he was doing? Did she see the consequences that might be coming? Tuesday of Holy Week seemed to be a quiet day with Jesus teaching. Was she there? What did she hear? What were the other mothers saying? After all, he had been called crazy by people from their village. Holy Thursday. What was her reaction to the Last Supper? Good Friday. The unimaginable horror of seeing your child not just die, but be executed in a painful way. Holy Saturday. What emptiness she must have felt. And then Easter, the roller coaster ride, when she got word that Jesus was not in the tomb. And then the story of the disciples on the road to Emmaus, as Jesus explained to them the meaning of everything that had happened. If you think of all the feelings that she experienced, how different are they from ours? Mary knew our feelings. And so we can turn to Mary as someone who knows us. Just as I turned to my mother and I thought she knew exactly what I was feeling. And we can ask ourselves during this coming week, as we look at the events of Holy Week, and realize that Mary experienced a full range of emotions. And what can we learn from Mary? The lessons will be different for each one of us, because each one of us is experiencing different things in our lives. But they are not out of the range of the experience of Mary. And let us give thanks to God for giving us Mary as our mother.